Good morning, good afternoon or good evening, depending on when you actually have the opportunity to view this session. Welcome to OneStrand's Fast Snapshot series. This week's session will be on R4i IPD Manager or Illustrated Parts Data Manager. My name is Tammy Holter. I will be hosting the session today, and Rita and I will be running us through the snapshot of IPD Manager. Welcome, Rita.
Thank you, Tammy.
Okay, the session today, being a snapshot, will run for approximately 15 minutes. So we're running these one session per week. We'll be running for the month. And the sessions will run from approximately 15 minutes, maybe a little bit over or under. So the purpose of IPD Manager is, of course, to automate production of illustrated parts data modules. The concept behind it is, of course, that you'll have an engineering information source, such as a LSAR database or CAD/CAM drawing systems, where you can obtain parts information and drawings that are associated with those. And we would like to automatically output illustrated parts data modules. Now, we have the option with this tool to convert to IPD schemas version 2 all the way through to 4.2.
Correct, we do.
So we'll be taking a look at that, how we configure those options, and then of course some of the background settings as well, because we can automatically or manually check in data modules into the CSDB after it's performed the conversion task. We have features such as multi-image figure support, which is pretty important in IPDs. And there's a little background option as well to map to third-party image conversion and auto hotspotting tools. And last one is the example that you'll see on our screen today. So a quick outline of the session. There'll be a general overview of the interface, some of the automated monitoring settings that Rita will demonstrate on how they're configured, and then the little map interface, so the wizard, and that's an important piece, and certainly, you know, it's a task that you'll want to keep refining, right? It's one of those items that you need to get hold of your data, your engineering data, map it, test it, see how it's coming out, you know, as your IPD data modules, and keep tweaking that till you get exactly what you want in your content in your IPD.
It's the core of what's going to happen.
That's right. The tool kind of just does it all. Once you've mapped that map file, really it just goes and sits in the corner and does its job, right? It's a completely automated processing tool. So
it can be, yes.
Yeah. So once we've configured all our settings, what we want automated, manual, and we've done that mapping, it's good to go. So we're going to take a look at that process. So I am going to hand you back to Rita, who is going to have a little demonstration of IPD Manager.
Okay, so you should see my screen.
I do.
Okay, so this is IPD Manager. From a normal operator's point of view, it's a pretty basic interface. There's not a lot that they need to do.
On a day-to-day basis, right?
No, it's very much configure it and set and forget. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to be able to set a source location. So the source location is where you're going to physically get those files that are going to be coming out of your LSAR or CAD/CAM system. So we've got that, so we set our source location, and then in our settings tabs, this is where we can then start to do that configuration of IPD Manager. So the first thing is we can set our CSDB connection so that we know what CSDB we're physically going to add this into. We can also have it set so it automatically checks those data modules in, so once it's processed them, it'll automatically push them into that database. And we can also mark it to say that we want it to be published. So again, we're giving you the choice. It just depends on what you're wanting to do.
And I mean, as a general process, people would probably be okay with check them in, particularly if you're automating a process of it in the middle of the night, check them in, but I'll check the folder and see that the IPDs are good before we go to publishing status.
Correct.
But they're all choices, right?
Absolutely, all choices. You can then remove the local files. So once it's been processed, remove them from that directory so that they're not going to get reprocessed.
Yep.
Logical process. And also, you know, our wonderful status settings that we have inside our CSDB.
Yep.
we can also set these to those that specific status setting.
Depending on your CSDB, you might say it's a baseline version or it's ready for QA or whatever it is that you want to set it to.
Absolutely. So whilst it's going through this process, it's then going to put that status setting in.
Yep.
Then once we've got those, we've then got some process settings. So the first thing is, do we want to move the data files? So those source files that we
want to delete them or move them or
correct. So again, to prevent all of that process of rerunning that information, we don't want to do duplications. We can also have prompt for review. Possibly a really bad idea if we're doing auto processing.
Yep, defeats the purpose.
But if you wanted, whilst you're doing your testing cycle, getting a prompt for review,
appropriate.
Not a bad one.
Yep.
Auto process, it simply means that whilst this application is up and running, it's going to look into that source directory.
Yep.
And if you've then put some new files in,
it's going to kick off.
It's just going to kick off the process.
Lovely.
So it'll just monitor that directory and just run whenever you put content in there. Okay, overwrite duplicates. So if you do get duplicate content out of your LSAR system, it's always possible. Then we'll just...
What do we do with it?
And the same thing, we can also create an empty module. So at least we've got a shell of information there that we can then start to work with. So we can go through that process. We've of course got some advanced settings. So the advanced settings, again, this is very much focused, first of all, from a preview point of view. What style sheet do we want to use to do that preview? So I've got mine set, it's going to use the style sheet that's inside my CSDB. But if you don't have the ability to connect to the CSDB, as long as you've got the style sheet local, you can do that. There are some tweaks that you need to do to the style sheet to get it to work locally, but it's all doable. Okay, and that includes any associated files that go with it. So if you've got any JavaScript that goes with those files,
if it's part of your style sheet, you need to make sure you get the file set.
Correct. Again, we also have, similar to what we've got inside our Media Gen window, where we can indicate, do we want to have the left or right side for the graphic to display? We can choose the same here.
People are quite particular about their IPDs, aren't they? Do I want the image on the left or on the right? So
absolutely.
Very important.
Then we start to come to our document data. So with this, since we're processing it, we need to know what is the security classification, your RPC cage code, your originator cage code, and your Brex. So you simply populate that information. Now you can see there my Brex says default. So that means it's going to use the default S1000B Brex.
Unless you say otherwise.
If I click onto the little lookup button and have a local copy of my Brex, it doesn't look into the CSDB. You need to have it local. But if you've got that Brex local, you point to it and it will then populate it into your data module. So you've still got that capability of being able to use your own Brex.
Otherwise it'll use default.
Correct. Okay, and as you mentioned, the Larson Auto Hotspotter settings, if they're utilising that, then they just put in the relevant information.
Where they can kick off the Larson.
Enable it, put in the executable, and then they've got to point to a config file.
Excellent.
Okay, so it's really quite a basic system.
So configuring ready for processing, like I said, is not a big task. We're ready now to start taking data, but of course we've got to map it to which schema.
Correct, and that's the big problem, and that's the one that will take you heaps of time to develop that information.
So it's a bit like developing a style sheet, right? You've got to
absolutely.
You've got to take a look at the source data, the engineering data, the drawing data, what you're getting out,
and you've also got to identify what needs to go into your output.
That's right, because I mean the engineering data might come with 15 columns of parts information. What is it that you want to deliver in your IETP in an IPD, right? That's
correct. So you need to be aware of all of those configurations. So I'm just going to open up and show. So as you said, when we're building a new map file, what happens is we click onto new and our wizard loads. Now in one way it's very frustrating, but in one way it's great because what you've got to do is you've literally got to go through and build a mapping based on the data that you know you've got. based on the knowledge that you have of what you need to go into your IPD data modules.
Yep.
So what's going to happen is as you manipulate through the wizard, you're going to get to a point where you're going,
I don't know.
I've got no idea.
That's right. I'm going to have to look more closely at the data or at what we need. Or
Correct.
Yep.
So at that point, you're going to have to cancel the wizard,
Yep.
get the modifications, update the source files,
Mm-hmm.
and then start it over again.
Yeah, or do a bit more analysis homework, and yeah, until you get to that point where you can configure everything you need to in the wizard, and then start testing data, and then tweaking. Yeah.
Correct, because you just take that a massive amount of time
Yep.
to be able to identify it. So really knowing your IPD schema for the version that you're working with is vital.
Yes. Yep.
Knowing what you need to have in your output.
Yep. In the IATP to the customer, what they would expect to see as a minimum. Yep.
That then helps you identify what needs to go into your source content.
Well, even, I mean, you know, the functionality, right, like you said, so what side do we want the image on? Do they expect hot spotting or multi-directional hot spotting? Is there anything else they expect in behaviour in the IPD? Because that's then a combination of what will I need to map in the wizard, what do I need to do in the style sheet? Like it's a bit of a whole, it's a whole configuration thing. But once it's done, there's literally nothing to do, right? Leave the tool to go do its job. So
when we have a look at it, the first thing that we've got to do if we're creating a brand new one is we've got to choose our version. Now, you said we supported from version 2.0 through to 4.2.
Yep.
Not only do we do that, but we actually support all of the patch versions as well.
Right, okay, so if we do have some of those, like particularly 4.01 was a very popular patch, wasn't it?
Yes. So again, we can choose which version of the spec we're working with.
Yep.
And then you've got a choice to either have only compulsory elements and attributes or one of each.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got to choose which one
you're working with. Mm.
If we go with only compulsory elements and attributes, then if you went into whatever authoring tools, such as, say, R4i Writer, and go new IPD data module, you're going to be presented with just the mandatory elements and attributes.
And that might not be enough for your delivery, right? So you need to know. So back to you need to know, before you go through the wizard, you kind of need to know these pieces. So almost go through the wizard or the doco to see what all the wizard screens are going to be, because you're going to have to know what you're going to get asked as you're going to map everything.
Correct.
Yeah.
So really, when you're creating a brand new mapping, you're going to do one of each element
First
and attribute.
Up.
And then it's a very time-consuming process, because each screen that comes up, you've then got to identify which ones you need and delete the ones that you don't. So that we can identify that information. So creating this map file is where you will spend heaps of time.
It's an essential process though.
Oh, absolutely. So I'm actually going to cancel. I'm not going to create a new one because it just takes way too long.
Yes. So are we going to show one that's pre-built, right?
So I'm just going to open up this particular one here. Now, this is one which is set to a version 4.0.
Okay, good.
So it's a 4.0 series. And with this, we then go through and we simply go next. And it knows all the schema information, so you don't need to have any of that information at all. And then you've got to point to your source file. So I'm pointing to a CSV file, but it could be a spreadsheet. It really depends on what comes out of your LSAR or CAD/CAM systems.
Okay, Okay. So basically this is the data file that we're going to need to convert into the Illustrated Parts Data module.
So similar to us saying, look, we're not happy with you connecting to our database. Most LSAR systems again say, no, we'll give you data.
Don't touch our database.
Don't touch our database. So you'd go through some sort of process of extracting that information from your LSAR or CAD/CAM systems. And you'd put that into this source location.
We've got customers that kind of export like midnight once a week, don't they? And pop them into a directory and IPD monitors.
Okay, and with that, there'll be a very formal convention for the naming of the files as well. Okay, so we'll set that.
Well, of course, that's an important part of the process, right? You want a data module at the end of it that's got a proper data module code and images that have proper ICNs as well that conform to the spec. So
not only that, but we need to make sure that the content that's coming out all complies to the right criteria as well.
Okay.
So from a mapping point of view, The items that are actually highlighted, that's the bit that the mapping tool cares about.
Okay, so whatever you highlight, it's going to look in those fields ready for mapping.
Correct. But when you're creating the mapping, you just seeing those headings is
not helpful.
Not helpful.
Yeah, sample data is always good.
So what you can do is you can actually highlight
the set
of information, and then when we go next, what it does then is it starts to do the configuration. So we get with the hardest one first.
So now it's actually showing us, so we've got the heading row and sample data lines, which like you said, just seeing headings sometimes of a spreadsheet is not helpful for, oh, I think I know what I'm looking at, but until you see the data and you go, okay, yep, I'm good, yep.
Correct. So you can see with this one, now when we're looking at the left-hand side, anything that is in a regular font, that's optional elements or attributes. Anything that's in bold is mandatory.
Right, okay, so we've got a few optionals in here, but most of them are just the mandatories that have been mapped for this reason.
For this particular one, we just needed basic information. So there was very limited information that we really needed to put into
this delivery.
Some can be super
quite complex,
Okay, and you can see we identify if it's an attribute with the little @ symbol. Or if it's an element, we have the little brackets.
Okay, so the interface again is very user-friendly, but it's that process of what's in your data that you're getting handed and what do you need to output and deliver to the customer.
Correct. And depending on what you're getting from your source system, determines what you're going to see. So you can see here that for the indenture, we've actually just mapped it to be 0. So there's no indenture happening
in the data. Okay,
Okay. Now you can see here for our internal ref ID,
we've got hotspots.
Remember it's version 4, so it's not version 4.1. So we're still using the original hotspot attribute names. And you can see here that the ID says hot. Then we've got brackets and we've then got item number. So you can do a mixture.
Okay, of typing a detail, picking up a field.
And a variable.
Right.
So we can go through that criteria. So we can see that we've got a mix here of hot and item number. So that will give you hot 1, 2, 3, 4. The internal ref target type is hotspot. Unlike in version 4.1, which is the IRTT11.
And so that's what we'd map if we were doing it to the other one.
Correct. And then with this, we can see we've only done the item sequence number. And so with that, we've then gone through and broken down all of the information
into what we want to detail
into all the different categories.
Excellent.
And if we're just picking a variable from the spreadsheet, you can actually click onto the drop-down list, and as you highlight,
I'll show you the data.
It shows you which data it is.
Nice.
So again, you can get that confirmation that you're getting the correct information.
So you can either type in there, select one of the fields, or type and select a field combo.
Correct. All combinations actually fully operational.
Beautiful.
We then go next, and of course we're creating brand new data modules. So now we need to be able to build our DMC. So again, we're going through this process of retrieving information from the spreadsheet to build our data module code.
Right, so the first part was going, these are the fields and I want to output it into these elements and attributes in the actual physical IPD content. Now we're going, okay, what's in the spreadsheet that I can pick up that will help me define on the fly what my unique data module code is?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, not just the unique data module code, but everything to make up
the proper valid DMC.
Everything, right down to your tech name, info name. So again, we're showing all of the mandatory information and optional information that you need.
Okay, excellent.
So we build our DMC. Next is now our creation of the graphic.
Okay, because we've output into the directory spreadsheets and images, and because the two go hand in hand, that's kind of the purpose of IPD.
So with this, what we do is we first of all need to tell it what is its source file name, and you can see there that we're actually picking it up from the variable.
Okay, so the original, in this particular case, we know the images are going to be popping in with a number of 1013224, and we're looking for a CGM. Right,
correct.
And we're about to start giving it a proper ICN.
So we've got our source. And then in here where we've got our info entity ident, we physically start to build
building blocks.
the ICN configuration.
And it's pointing to different pieces of the fields, yeah.
Correct. So then what we end up with is we get
look at that ICN. Okay, so on the right was what it's starting as, because we went into the spreadsheet and the spreadsheet says this data matches this image, and they've listed it in a field. So on the right there, we know that's the image name we're looking for, and we're going to convert it into that ICN on the left.
Correct. So again, we go through that whole process,
and mapping that
right down to all of the configuration. And of course, when we're looking at our hotspots, remembering we've built our hotspot IDs in the catalogue sequence number.
Yep.
There's our ID there. So again, we can do
the matching,
of information.
Yep.
And inside your hotspot, you can also have a reference to another data module. So we've also built that capability in so that we can get that configuration to work as well.
If that's appropriate for the data.
If it's necessary, yep. Okay, so we go next. Then we can also do our external tech pubs.
Yep.
And match that information.
Okay, yep, okay. And not an unusual one, right, in IPD to have a sort of section that's, got referenced other information, yep. Especially, for civilian projects, they kind of do the reverse on data, don't they? They're very illustrated parts data driven, and then they drill down to procedures or bulletins or other things from the IPD. So
you might be going through multiple levels of illustrated parts to eventually get down to a procedure.
Yeah.
So again, we can do the same thing for reference technical pubs.
Yep, what info's in that spreadsheet or data file to be able to pick up. Yep.
Correct. And we then give it a name. So even though that's a very simplistic view on how to
of what the process is, they are the screens. They're the things you're going to have to know. So if you know what the screens are, know what your source data is that you're getting, know where you want to get to, you need to have all those things in front of you and prepared to do a bit of testing round and round.
Correct. And building that map file, it's that cycle.
Yeah, go back round, have a look at it.
Point where you go, oh, missing that information, or we need that information.
Hence, back at your front screen when you did, you were doing the configuration of the IPD tool originally before the mapping file, having settings like what style sheet would you like to preview it with, that's pretty helpful. And it's a little bit of chicken and egg, isn't it? Because you often don't develop a style sheet till you get your IPD data.
Correct.
But it's kind of handy to be able to do a quick preview as you're, sort of getting to that point. So even a basic mapping, would be nice to kind of help with previews in that cycle.
Yeah, look, the more information you know about for your output requirements, the easier it is actually to run and develop IPD Manager. So being able to know what is your IPD structure and what information you need in it really does make it a lot easier to identify the information. So then to actually physically run, it's the easiest part out of all of it, simply by clicking onto the little blue button.
Yep.
And it will then run, and if there's any issues, you'll then be able to see that information.
So now you're of course running it manually, as if this is exactly what you would be doing if you were testing your map file, right?
Correct.
You map, retest, run, take a look at the data, do some tweaks on your map because you're not getting quite what you want, run it again.
Yes, and constantly going through that whole cycle.
Where this, otherwise, we can have this, like you said, automated to run and check the data modules into the CSDB if you want.
Yep. So if I have auto process enabled, it'll just sit there and monitor, and it'll go, oh, you've got data in that directory, run it. And it'll just keep on running through.
Yep.
Now we do have the option to be able to preview.
Yep.
So even though we didn't have it turned on, you can simply go to
after
it
the fact.
after the fact. And we're generous enough to provide you with a folder for
time, date, stamp. Yep.
It's all time, date.
Yep.
So you can then simply choose it, select the data module, and it will then preview that. And I most probably don't have a graphic with this one, but if there was bi-directional
hotspotting,
you would be able to see that information. What I might do is just go back to a slightly older one. That one's not going to work.
It's got an image. Yep, find one with an image. And I notice on the right there, Rita, is the error log. So and because it'll report missing images. It'll report if there's some stuff that's got wrong values in it, for instance. You know, we've got stuff like that going on.
Yep.
So it will tell you everything as it's processing, and so you can go have a look at that data.
Correct. So what you can see the image loads, and as we're working through, it'll then highlight content.
Yep.
So that's an additional function that needs to be controlled by style sheeting to get that presentation.
Yep.
But you can then see that.
But you're actually testing that style sheet kind of at the same time that you're looking at the data as well.
Correct. You're verifying what you're needing it to do to make sure.
And that error log on the right, it outputs into that folder as well, doesn't it? So the time date stamp, you get the error log as a log with the combination of the IPD XML files and the images, the CGM images.
So you can simply click onto Open Source Directory, and when you go into that folder, you'll see there's your activity log.
Yep. It's just coming up behind you. It's got a little bit of lag there on the recording. There we go, and there's the activity log.
And all your data modules.
Wonderful. Okay, well, thank you, Rita, for that session. Thank you, everyone, for watching R4i IPD Manager, which is the first video we have in the Fast Snapshot series webinar. As mentioned, my name is Tammy Holter, and our software presenter today was Miss Rita Nye. If you have any questions for us, there's our email addresses and phone numbers, and we hope that you'll join us for next week's session on R4i DMX, which is our data module exchanger tool. We look forward to seeing you then. Thank you.